artistic perspective dimension, the spirit of an artistic practice in this action which you call indie publishing. And third, of course, now I don't have that space, which is becoming more expensive. And today it's already demolished. The whole thing that you see in the first couple of slides are totally no longer flattened the land, and they will construct AI-related industry there and high-class, middle-class buildings, housings there. So now also, it's not very easy for you to do everything public because the public is no longer what you're familiarized with, what you feel trustworthy back 10 years ago. So now, if you're still doing something community building related, then what is at stake? You need to always think about that stake. So this stake is part of the limit that you have to think to be responsible to whatever are working with you together in this project. So, and of course, finally, publication means things to be publicized, right? Public. So then what is the public? Where are they? Are they still in the being? Are there new publics forming? And even they are publics with boundaries, then what's the shape? And what's the fluidity of it that we can recognize and still be part of it? So next slide. Next slide, yeah. So this is a short film I don't think we have time to go through, which has something to do with the exhibition that I made after my project was reported in Shanghai. It's an exhibition totally composed of illegal publications, which is very bizarre because in 2023, when the pandemic case was already, pandemic policy in China shifted, so I was invited to join this exhibition. So we exemplified our books, not in the book format. No, none of them can be opened, but to show the backstage of the production and the production and struggles behind these books. And so now, since 2023, I'm working more on another idea, which has to be tabling. This word is very odd and new, I think, because mostly we will say vendoring. If you participate in an art book fair, you say, I'm a vendor. But because in most cases, it's not the booth that we have the luxury space top down, but we only have a table of this, maybe this is already a quite decent big table. Sometimes we have to share the half of this size table. So it's about selling books outside China, which becomes one of my main practices, which is something very performative than profit-making or sustainable even, because the cost of sending books outside China is very expensive, of course, logistically. And of course, I've already asked the volunteers to help me to set up the table and representatives. But at the same time, it's very unsure who your readers are. So under this, I'm still insisting doing this, probably just to showcase that to how far can independent distribution go. Because even in art book world, most of the distributions were centralized by major, mostly European-based art book distributors, like most typically the Dutch-based Idea Book. But I think, so that's why most of the independent art publishers, they themselves don't hold their own stock. Their stocks are in Europe, in UK, or in the Netherlands, with these mainstream major distributors. So they don't have their own book at hand. I think it's very, very strange. You create something, but you are not giving them to the people, in fact, by yourselves. And this mediation, I think, is not something that I want to admit as the only way to be independent. I mean, to be independent, one important thing is that you are doing your distribution by yourself as well, independent of the mainstream channels, however mainstream it could be. So the most extreme way is to bring the books to the people in any localities that are still hosting a local Zinfest or art book fair, as small as like Ghent, like in Belgium, like these kind of cities, or in Austin, Texas, or in some they are proper towns, but they're not necessarily in the mainstream art book like consciousness. So my books will be sent to all these very local events and represented by our Chinese friends locally, and to face the local readers and sell them directly. So this is my main strategy now to do independent distribution. Next slide, please. So this is how they look like. These are in Amsterdam, KL, San Diego, Dusseldorf, Seattle, Montreal, San Francisco, Bangkok. And that was in the first and second year. And this year we go to even smaller cities and townships because we feel outside Asia, we are better well received in zine fests rather than art book fairs, in particular in the Western discourse. Because art book fairs, in particular in Europe, tends to be very stubborn uh, and very close-minded. They are still looking for better design, as if, rather than the content and the issues raised by the publications. While the zine fairs and anarchist book fairs, independent book fairs, they concern a lot about the independent spirit. So that's why this next slide. Next slide, thank you. Yeah, so from this year on, we go to like smaller events. Next slide, yeah. All these people, these faces, these are friends that some of them I have not yet met because I just recruited them through online, and they are not my friend to start with, but now we are all kind of connected. Now I think we yearly participate 150 to 200 kind of fairs all over the world. So each weekend we have one or two fairs to attend. Yes, representation via improvising through volunteers. In particular, in the case of these volunteers, they are not part of our team who participated in the production of these books. So at first they will be questioning themselves whether they are legitimized enough or good enough to represent the table. But I told them that you are good enough because first of you already read these books and you know the background, and I'll give you online training. So, and also you are from, mostly because they are overseas Chinese students, they are from my background, yeah. So I think they are already very qualified. So, but still they need to improvise a lot, but on their own to explain whatever they think is about these books and relevance to these books. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so these are the points. I don't have time to go through about my feeling towards this practice, how this constructed relations, a new kind of bridging possibilities of diaspora Chinese to their local communities and our publications to the local readers. And I just want to tell this counter-representation of books from China, because at first people will think that, oh, it's a Shanghai-based publisher, so they will expect us to tell China, like a lot of stories from China, which is something that we don't want to. We can, but still we hope it to be a broader Asian and third world perspective that we're proposing. Although the books are made in China, doesn't mean that our authors are from China and designers are from China, and our perspectives are only limited to China. Yeah, next slide. And next slide, yeah. Yeah, so some of the volunteers will also come back to visit me during the summer and winter when they come back to China, so we can catch up and know each other again. Next slide. So these are our new publications that you can find also on our stands. Next slide. Yeah, so just you can go through these slides and I can, yeah, these are our previous publications. Next slide. Yeah, this book is also related to Filipino political prisoners, female political prisoners. Next slide. Yeah, these are our Instagram. Yeah, next slide. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we can talk more. Yeah.
This is some high tech. I don't understand. Okay. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Xiao. I'll be presenting a part of my PhD dissertation program. So it's the first time I'm speaking in front of my study object. So I would very much like to hear back from Chen Yun after my presentation. First, let me introduce my PhD PhD program briefly. So my dissertation focused on local art practice in Guangzhou and played with this polysemic Cantonese word mo and the interwoven meaning within its homonymic field. Next, please. Next, please. It's dense emulation, modeling, coping, and nothingness at the same time. In my ongoing project, Mo is not simply a linguistic pun. It is a method for asking how artistic practice borrow, repeat, deviate, and survive under changing political and material conditions. This presentation draws from chapter 2 and turns to print-based practice and independent publishing, including practice beyond Guangzhou. I ask how transforming an image from block to paper might produce a life method, and how the printed matter continued this transfer through workshop, book fair, poster route, table, and hand and shelf. I'm interested not only in what moves, but how contact, friction, transformation, remark what is moving. So my two case is the Guangzhou artist Oh Fei Hong and his self-organized zine project Qiji, and the Shanghai-based independent publisher Chen Yun and her organization 51 Persone, who just presented. Wu's work is rooted in a very small shop home, a workshop, friendship, and everyday life, while Chen Yun's publication travels through global workfare network, often in her physical absence. Both return us to this performativity of print-based practice, making, circulation, keeping this printed matter. Next, please. So these two concepts guide my discussion of how printed form repeat, change, and travel. Homi Bhabha described mimicry as a repetition that produced a difference that is almost the same, but not quite. I use this formulation to consider how modern woodcut, a technique borrowed and repeatedly transformed across contexts, unsettles the authority of any stable origin. Diana Taylor describes performance as a vital act of transfer, transmitting knowledge, memory, and identity through reiterated behavior. Her formulation also allows me to attend not only to the printed object, but also to the embodied action through which it is made and circulated. So across this movement, relation is produced through contact rather than established between already completed entities. Forms are remade as they pass through new hands, materials, and circumstances. The book table will also shift the discussion from the discussion about book table will also shift the circulation as a sort of physical movement to rearrange all those cultural roles. For instance, who can appear as an artist, host, interpreter, or even so-called cultural agent. Next, please. So before I met Wu, I've heard Qiji's book circulating through independent art bookstores, including Bungie Space in New York, where they appear beside publications such as Yoko Ono's Grapefruit, yet the place where they're made is much more modest. Next, please. O's studio is a 3x5 meter storefront with a roll-up shutter. It is at once his home, book studio, workshop, storage room, and workshop, and also a gathering place. Three shelves in the store hold self-published and vintage books, and rescued yellow cat watches people sitting, smoking, and talk outside the store. After introducing myself, I asked Wu to teach me how to make a woodcut. He stared at me with her piercing eyes and said, "Why don't you just do it?" That sentence became my first instruction. He gave me a small rubber panel, easy for a beginner, and showed me 3 carving knives. I decided to imitate San Yu's elephant. So he said, "Always keep your helping hand behind your carving hand." I was left to carve after he said so. The process felt surprisingly intuitive. The meeting point between positive and negative space became messy, but eventually the recognizable elephant emerges. When I finished, O led me to the pigment near the kitchen sink. "Be bold. People mix different colors. It is the most fun," he told me. Next, please. I mixed red and blue and print a purple elephant 3 times in a shrimp paper. Each print differs because the rolling pressure and pigment varies. The paper retained hesitation, uneven falls, excess color, and misalignment. This small experience made Taylor's act of transfer tangible. Transfer is not neutral. Material conditions and bodily decision changed the image at each passage. The block was not a stable original. Each print returned to this almost the same, but not quite. Next, please. As the print dries, O showed me Qiji. Each issue is has a woodcut cover. The name Qiji, 赤子, 次子, begins with his idea of producing something suitable for toilet reading. In Cantonese, it sounds like toilet paper, while the written character look provocative and prickly. And the first issue grew from collective contribution. Later issues addressed menstruation, menopause, queer emotion, delivery worker, and prison life. Next, please. In Shawan 501, O assembles his court sentence, letters, and portraits of cellmates from his 7-month imprisonment after graffiti project. Because O described himself as a proletarian and works with the media so clearly associated with China's leftist history, I asked whether Qiji was connected to Lu Xun's woodcut movement of the 1930s. "We're not connected," he replied immediately, and pointed to the book. He asked, "Are you interested in collecting them? The set is 500 RMB. I hesitated when I heard the price and eventually bought the first issue to show my support. He explained that woodcut printing is a way to connect people and sustain himself. "Do not connect us with the leftist tradition. We are pure anarchists doing our own stuff collectively." I take his refusal seriously. It prevents the history from being a very smooth genealogy. Qiji's relation to early leftist woodcut emerged through proximity, rejection, and interruption rather than direct inheritance. Next, please. Lu Xun promoted modern creative woodcut after encountering European printmaking in Japan. He values it as simple, convenient, and useful, rapidly produced, widely reproduced, visually forceful, and marked by a beauty of strands. He encouraged artists to adopt foreign good rules while selecting from China's heritage. The medium, therefore, does not preserve a pure Western source, and it also brings European printmaking into contact with Han reliefs, Ming and Qing illustrations, and traditional Nianhua. Yet, Lu Xun's model retains a particular relation between intellectual and masses. The art observes and interprets social reality. The reproducible print carries the expression. After 1949, woodcut has gradually institutionalized. During Cultural Revolution, its force and reproducibility enters an ideological visual system in which the people are always some official image. By the 1980s, woodcut had lost both the market and the people. Reproducibility conflicted with the art market built around scarcity, while while institutional repetition has exhausted its claim to the mass address. Next, please. So if seen against the histories of leftist woodcut, Shubin's Book from the Sky turns the logic of printing inside out. It preserves manual labor, repetition, plurality, and appearance of cultural authority while removing rebel meanings. The act of transfer remains in these contemporary artworks, but it carries the empty form of authority rather than revolutionary communication. More broadly, many artists of the 1980s used contemporary art to turn life rapidly into certain concept. In contrast to this institutional recognized artist, O pressed a concept back into practical conditions of life. His questions are concrete. Who make the work? Where is it made? Who pays the rent? How is it printed, sold, mailed, or taken away, or kept? How does it continue under this censorship, low profit, unstable social conditions? This detour clarifies Qiji's return to woodcut. It begins with the refusal of this professionalization. Their workshop reduced woodcut in a very few basic steps: drawing, carving, printing, and then binding. Safety matters, but technical orthodoxy does not. This descaling is not an absence of care. It is a redistribution of technical authority. It enables them to make something that can be held. It enables those workshop participants to make something to be held, exchanged, and fold into a zine book. O's collaborator Chen Yifei described woodcut as democratic. Everyone can get started easily in the chaos. Participants have their own rhyme and magnetic field because they're making their own voice. The politics lies less in participation by itself than in who is permitted to make an image, to make a zine book, or even to make arrows in their making. The most important is a transferring process, again and again, Chen explained. You can never get the effect you want immediately. Instead, it brings many unexpected and better things. You have to accept deviation and work through each step of deviation and adjustment. What you make will be different from what you imagine. The act of transfer, therefore, becomes more than a technique. It becomes a way of coping. From sketchbook to block and block to paper, each stage involves some loss, adjustment, and repair. Error is carried forward while all those processes reshaped and adjusted in the next transfer. The same logic extended to the infrastructure of Qiji. Friends share the studio to lower the rent, while zine sell workshop, teaching, all those inexpensive material and friendship sustain a small micro economy of the community. The studio is less abundant institution than a relay point through which people, tool, money, and zine is passed. Woodcut thus holds together friendship, editing, sales, and maintenance, and managed to maintain the space. O's movement from night patrol to home patrol also makes this life infrastructure invisible. Next, please. So around 2016, O rode a motorbike at night and sprayed bad graffiti across Guangzhou. Because night patrol took place outside the museum's protected frame, it crossed into law and led to his arrest. Next, please. Afterward, his practice began retreating and shrinking back. He painted a mural inside a residence and called the project Home Patrol. When the public space became fragile, O pressed art back into a wall home, a storefront, a sheet of paper, a block of wood, and a group of friends. Zizi's politics lies not only in the issue it discusses, but in how they're made, printed, and how they circulate. Art making is disturbed by life, altered by error, and sustained through small infrastructure. The act of transfer becomes vital because it embraces amateurism, chance, and misalignment. From this locally embedded practice, the paper moves outwards. Chen Yun's publication project pushed the same question into another scale. So what happens when books leave the local scene? How do they continue to produce relation through distance, logistics, and absence? Next, please. The shift from O to Chen is not simply a move from Guangzhou to Shanghai. Their practice intersect through collaborations on book covers, illustrations, publications, publishings, and wider circle of self-organized cultural work. The Dinghaiqiao community, which Chen Yun initiated around 2015, also become a point of transfer among self-organized groups in mainland China. Her publications have appeared on more than 200 tables and enter more than 130 book fair. Books let her communicate with and observe the world from China through printing, shipping, tabling, buying, carrying. Because of her independent publication, Chen Yun was investigated on suspicion of illegal business operation and could not travel abroad freely for a period of time. Within this forced absence, the book stand acquire the function of a surrogate body. Where she cannot arrive, the book arrive for her. Where she cannot stand, the table stand. When she cannot meet the reader face to face, the book meet them on her behalf. The book stand is not only a sales point, but a way of standing in the world. It externalizes Chen Yun's body into books, tables, routes, volunteers, buyers, and readers. Yet, it is a relay, but not a transparent sort of replacement. Each encounter actually changes what the practice becomes in the location. It also echoes what Chen Yun mentioned, the volunteer has to improvise. In Taylor's turn, it is not only an archive of object. In Diana Taylor's turn, it is not only an archive of an object, but a repertoire of repeated action, packing, mailing, tabling, hosting, and then keeping. These actions produce knowledge through postal delays, table fees, custom rules, readers' questions, volunteer feedback, borders, censorship, and interruptions. It is incomplete knowledge assembled through this contact and misalignment rather than the whole smooth mastery of the process. A right-wing march around a London fair, a change at Printed Matter New York, or a different atmosphere of European city becomes legible through what happened around the table stand, how they are displayed, ignored, misunderstood, purchased, and how they are kept. So compare with Qiji's small scale, Chen Yun's 51 personae operates through a more fluid and global dispersed network of publishing, volunteering, and exchange. The books travel globally through China's inexpensive materials, mature printing industry, and developed logistics, bringing together economic and cultural into the same space. Chen Yun compares her book into Yiwu commodity, low-priced, shipped, tabled, sold, and carried away. Yet, books also carry situated knowledge, intellectual and artistic expression, testing how far language and independent publishing can travel under pressure. At overseas fairs, local Chinese student volunteer staff at staff the table, introduce books, receiving readers, and make the sale happen. For many of them, this is the first entry into the alternative public cultural life of the city where they study. Around the table, they become temporary hosts, interpreter, and the agent of a publishing project. The book stands in for Chen Yun, and it also allows others to stand differently. The distribution does more than moving those objects. It recognize in the process, it recognizes who can speak and who can occupy a public space. Circulation does not become public or political automatically. It does so when it alters who can appear and who can show themselves in the public. Like Chen Yun emphasized a healthy microeconomy. Without stable funding, one book must help sustain the next. Yet sales does not simply mean surrender to the market. Buyers, he says, are her new patrons. By buying and keeping a book, reader allows it to enter another side of life. Next. So the table, therefore, does not merely represent Chen Yun in her absence. It can generate further practice. Sometimes volunteers become content creators themselves, transforming their book fair experience into zines and allowing the knowledge produced through participation to continue through bookmaking and circulation. Seen together, all those two cases return us to print history from another direction, from Lu Xun's creative woodcut, from institutionalization and Xu Bing's unreadability, to the small infrastructures of Qiji and 51 Personae. Baba helps us understand this history as repetition without a stable origin. Woodcut is borrowed, localized, institutionalized, and then returning to this almost the same, but not quite. Diana Taylor helps us to see the print that cannot be contained by this archive. It remains active through embodied practice of making, distributing, and circulating. The body does not disappear into reproduction. It disperses across paper, book, route, fair, and act of reading. These movements rearrange those public positions through and around cultural production. Artists or amateurs, absent or present, producer or buyers, speakers or readers. Circulation matters not only because it carries an image or a book away, but because it redistributes who can become perceptible as this cultural agent. Qiji returned woodcut not to the people as an official category, but to friends, neighbors, workshop, participants, buyers, readers, temporary collaborators. 51 Personae distribution in turns distribution into the method of relation, knowledge, and surrogate presence. Their practice share a central question. How can cultural work continue moving when public space, stable funding, and bodily presentation, and those guaranteed public are not available? The politics of this printed matter practice lies not only in what they represent, but in how they create participation and sustain those small-scale economies. Their movement is not frictionless. Flow does not mean smooth circulation. It means a practice's capacity to continue through the interruption, impossibility, and adjustment. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot about this. Okay. On the surface, the global spread of delicate white lace in the 19th century demonstrates how Western colonial education and economies relied on lace making to transform Native women into ideal subjects. Over the last few years, I have been unraveling the largely accepted origins of lace making in China by venturing towards a reparative reading of this particular history, one which threads multiple timelines and geographic locations. This tactic of attending to texture reveals age-old resonances across state lines. By following the thread of a needle, a reparative reading studies lace not just as a noun or a commodity, but as a verb, as looping, crossing, and twisting. As Glissant writes, opacities can coexist and converge, weaving fabrics. To understand these truly, one must focus on the texture of the weave and not on the nature of its components. What follows is a method of study, of reading, and feeling through texture. Stitches in air. After the First Opium War and the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842, the British established their first treaty ports in China. Merchants and missionaries quickly settled in these harbor towns, bringing along with them lace-making instructors to educate and convert orphaned girls. Many credit the introduction of lace making in China to Lily McMullen, where she and her husband ran a Christian orphanage and lace embroidery workshop in Chifu, present-day Yantai, called the James McMullen Industrial Mission School. Besides Yantai, many port towns in China began producing needle lace, also known as Wanlushi lace or Huabian, which means 10,000 strands of silk, but it is also a transliterated name for Venice. Venetian lace was initially brought to Shanghai, but made popular in Shaoshan, a small town within Hangzhou, a region that was already known for its silk embroidery. Next slide. Oh, it's already there. Great. Artist and fourth-generation lace maker Rivers Jinanzhu describes the introduction of lace to her hometown. On the 6th day of the 8th lunar month in 1919, a Shanghai businessman brought 4 Italian Catholic missionaries to Shaoshan and gathered 24 women as the inaugural students of Italian needle lace making in China. Since then, a lace industry has developed in the Shaoshan area, and its significance has been engraved into the daily life of its people. As part of this community, 4 generations of women in my family have inherited this Western tradition. Unfortunately, the dark reality was that they were unable to even afford the lace that they made. Instead, their work became transitional products made to be sold overseas. As the artist elucidates, this inheritance is often overlooked and underappreciated. It is not considered theirs and is instead intentionally mislabeled as Irish or Venetian when it enters the market. Jou's lace is incredibly fine and benefits from a handheld loop to magnify the minuscule cascades of interlocking stitches. Her needle laces appear like topographical landscapes, such as in Trace, a large-scale work from 2023, which was made with 9 other women from her hometown. The design for Trace was inspired by all the loose paper patterns found in her family's factory. They were used patterns with thousands of pricked holes indicating where the lace maker inserted her needle. These patterns were worn out and are usually tossed after use, but Jou collected these pages and showed them beside the finished lacework. The weathered paper patterns were loosely assembled into a book, which allowed the viewer to gently flip through the pages and feel the residue of the lace maker's intensive labor. Suddenly, what was once viewed as trash or simply a discardable byproduct is treated with the utmost care. Its crinkled pages gingerly read like Braille. Besides its felt text, the patterns were also marked with calligraphic symbols invented by the Shaoshan lace makers to indicate specific styles of needle lace, such as Brussels point, double Brussels point, diamond stitch, etc. These stitches are all composed of the basic buttonhole stitch, but may include variations like a skipped loop or an extra twist within each stitch. While the lace makers may not have been literate, they came up with their own system of writing. Trace is not just the final white lace work, but includes the creased pattern papers that reveal the unseen sides of this industry and an iconography legible only to the Shaoshan lace makers. Besides the commodity that Shaoshan became known for, Trace honors the entire complex process of lace making. In the communally made textile, moments of tidy and tightly stitched areas sit beside large open holes, bringing to mind Jou's grandma's initial reaction to lace. The artist's grandmother remarked that she initially found lace to be a bit ugly. Why would one want to wear a fabric filled with holes? but she continued to make lace because it was a source of income. Zhu recalls her grandmother instructing her to wash her hands with bleach before making lace in order to get the grease out of her hands and to prevent herself from staining the pure white textile. Next slide, please. Thank you. The artist challenges this by continuing to make lace in intentionally misaligned colors by using a kasuri or ikat technique to dye her sewing threads in a variety of colors. The lace that results from this ikat thread is vibrant and fuzzy, and in the areas where two colors meet, in contrast to the white lace that she was raised around. There are no crisp edges to the pattern colors, but rather the colors bleed into one another, much like lace making itself. The tradition does not belong to one place as much as the familiar narrative is often recited. Sometimes the artist makes reference to that history by creating her works with bleached white thread, explicitly hearkening to the lace-making traditions brought to her hometown by Italian missionaries. Other times, however, she uses yellow goldenrod threads and places a delicate hand-woven ikat fabric behind the open networks. They blur the line between needle lace and needle loop embroidery. Next slide. While lace may be read as a foreign imposition, read from another perspective, it is a craft that brings Zhu closer to the women in her family and that predates the arrival of missionaries, as the larger region of Hangzhou had long been famous for exquisite silk embroidery. In the last century, her hometown has become well known for Venetian lace, but perhaps this particular repertoire was already actively practiced long before the acquisition of its foreign name. In the clouds, pierce the thick cloud of unknowing with a sharp dart of longing love. Do not turn away no matter what happens, writes an anonymous 14th century Christian mystic. The writer likened contemplative prayer to a cloud of unknowing. Consequently, such clouds are carefully stitched onto one 18th century Taoist vestment. Folding time and space across centuries and cultural geographies, I linger with these sacred clouds in order to suspend judgment, to withhold that tendency to categorize. Following the meandering clouds wherever they might lead me, I recall my Amma, a devout Taoist Buddhist and a seamstress. The memories of her hands massaging prayer beads and her skillful acumen with needle and thread have sharpened my focus on the tactile qualities of this robe. Its meticulous needle-looped stitches surprisingly resemble needle lace and what has become recognized as a European textile tradition. Emblazoned on the back of this highest-ranking priest's robe, 18 clusters of clouds flank the central golden tower denoting the palace of heaven. Two white cranes mirror one another as they flock at the shoulder blades of the priest, and many more cranes with gold-gilded wings can be found interspersed between blossoming mushroom-lingsed clouds. Next slide, please. This particular vestment is also known as a jiangyi, which literally translates to the robe of descent, wherein heaven and earth meet through the body of the priest. Lost in the dazzling imagery of Chinese cosmology, my eyes are entranced by the movement of shimmering silk thread. They guide me to moments of decay, where the threads begin to fray. In numerous areas, the needle-looped silk threads composing voluminous clouds are starting to unravel, revealing calligraphic ink on yellowing paper underneath. Perhaps they were notations marked by its maker to indicate a change in colored thread or technique. When I ask my extended family members about this Taoist vestment, they recall memories of witnessing religious garments such as these while participating in funerary rituals during which relatives of the deceased walked in a circle while chanting, "Round and round they go," miming the motion of looped stitches. The Taoist priest facilitates such rites as the soul of the deceased transitions from this life into otherworldly realms. In Taoism, the spirit remains immortal and dwells within the universe even after the body perishes. Likewise, long after the priest has passed, the robe continues to live many lives. Before its entry into the basement of the Art Institute of Chicago, what had this most distinguished jiangyi beheld that led to its eroding embroidery? How many priests and later wealthy members of Western society have developed an intimate understanding of its Ramie-lined interiors? This embroidered robe was gifted to the Art Institute by Jeannie C. Stevenson, the wife of American lawyer Colonel Alexander F. Stevenson in 1907. At the time of its arrival in Chicago, textile workers in occupied treaty ports across China were continuing this technique of needle loop stitches except now under a different name and for the purposes of another religion, as needle lace taught by white Christian missionaries to Chinese women and girls. Next slide. Needle loop embroidery is a technique that has been practiced in China since the Yuan dynasty. One particular panel, dated to the late 14th and early 15th century at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, is an especially well-preserved example of this holy embroidery. Whereas needle-looped embroidery remains attached to a silk fabric support, needle lace is clipped from its backing when completed. Such needle-looped stitches, also known as buttonhole stitches, are the same basic foundation of Italian needle lace, or punto in aria, stitches in air. Supposedly emerging from 16th century Italy, this form of lace making broke away from the rectilinear restrictions of cut or drawn work, allowing for more fluid designs and curved flourishes. Throughout history, textile workers are often rendered anonymous and rarely given the recognition they deserve. While this particular Taoist robe is uniquely inscribed with the name of a maker on its left sleeve, Zhang Wenda of Haichang, it is unclear whether Zhang Wenda was simply the name of a workshop encompassing numerous unnamed embroiderers, such as in the case of James McMullen's mission school. The stitched inscription could refer to a crafts family in Haining and Hangzhou during the Ming Dynasty. It is possible that they were still in operation during the Qing Dynasty when this vestment was made. This region has long been known for its silk production and embroidery. It is no surprise, then, that European lace making might take root here. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, craft schools organized by Christian missionaries served the purpose of proselytizing and westernizing local populations in colonial territories. Established nearly a century after the fabrication of this Taoist robe, McMullen's mission school trained many Chinese women and girls in the art of lace making, yet little is known about the lace makers who labored, producing this exquisite yet underpaid art form. Is it possible that they recognized these loop stitches as already a part of their needlework repertoire? Sadia Hartman coined the term critical fabulation as a way to write into history's omissions. Recognizing the violence of the archive, critical fabulation works into irretrievable gaps and holds space for perspectives that have been rendered invisible. It is a contemplative process that perceives a cloud of unknowing as a precondition and relies upon speculative imagination more so than objective facts. Hartman makes clear that the outcome of this method is a recombinant narrative, which loops the strands of inconsummate accounts which weaves past, present, and future, just like the pathway of a needle as it loops backwards in order to move forwards. Stitch upon stitch, the structure relies on what came before. Textiles cannot be made without bringing the past along. My own attempts at embroidering a needle-looped Lingzi cloud reveals an identical structure to needle lace, a form and skill that was transmitted around the world to regions in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, so as to Christianize colonial subjects while supplying Western markets with luxurious handmade lace at a time when machines were beginning to replace methods of artisanal fabrication. By practicing needlework, I reenact through my hands the haptic experiences of these invisibilized women in order to attend to what cannot be discovered in the archives. While much remains unknown, critical fabulation searches for another way of knowing that lingers with what could have been, in the words of scholar Lisa Lowe. This, Lowe explains, symbolizes aptly the space of a different kind of thinking, a space of productive attention to the scene of loss. What surfaces from a careful observance of absence and loss. Beneath a threadbare cloud, a hand show is inscribed on crisp paper. Its presence is a mystery as it differs from the frequent numbers which disclose themselves as possible steps in the process of its making. This emergent so begs the question, what is the role of the hand when encountering the unknown? As opposed to approaching knowledge with a grasping or extractive hand, can the hand be mobilized in some other way? The classic Taoist text Dao De Jing notes, a great tailor does little cutting. Likewise, the Zhang Yi refuses the individuation of sleeves and veils the silhouette of the human figure within. After all, cutting is besides the point. Spirituality does not operate under the splicing logics of the scientific method, which strives towards the separability and singularity of known objects. Rather, this robe of descent folds heaven and earth, thereby collapsing what is high and low into the same plane, onto layered fabric. Pierce that thick cloud of unknowing with a sharp dart of longing love. Perhaps the call then is not to cut, but to pierce, to stitch, to compose embroidered clouds with a doting eye and a steady hand. Like the medieval manuscripts upon which the anonymous mystic inscribed the cloud of unknowing, this Taoist robe becomes a palimpsest containing over a dozen materials ranging from ramie, cotton, and silk to delicate threads wrapped in peacock feathers and gilded gold paper. Next slide. In a Benedictine monastery in Engelberg, Switzerland, another illuminated manuscript has been meticulously mended with silk and linen loop stitches. Dated to the 12th century, these codices contain the sermons of Augustine inscribed on parchment. Parchment sheets were typically made of the skin of goats and sheep, and the preparation process can produce slits and holes when scraping the hide. While some of the mending was intended to be as invisible as possible, other areas were delightfully decorated with colorful combinations of green, purple, pink, and yellow silk stitches. As textile scholar Gillian Vogelsang Eastwood observes, the needle lace character of some of the repairs is clear from the use of the buttonhole stitches. She wonders if the story of lace, originating in 16th century Italy, could be reconsidered as Benedictine monks were known to have traveled widely, perhaps bringing with them this particular method of needlework. To follow the history of lace is to arrive at a cloud of unknowing to anonymous authors. The foundational buttonhole stitch is shared across cultures and used for both functional and decorative purposes. Intentionally holy and holy needle lace and needle loop embroidery are akin. They eventually take on different aesthetic characteristics in the places where they proliferate, but their structure is essentially the same. These loop stitches have always been around, encircling past, present, and future. Reparative reading. The acts of stitching and writing are inherently related. Each mark is an attempt at expression, and how we read those marks matters. As Eve Sedgwick theorizes in Touching Feeling, reparative reading, as opposed to paranoid reading, is a vulnerable arrangement because it makes space for surprise. She writes, hope, often a fracturing, even a traumatic thing to experience, is among the energies by which the reparatively positioned reader tries to organize the fragments and part objects she encounters or creates. Reparative reading necessitates a kind of disorientation of space and time in order to imagine other possibilities. In contrast to paranoia, which Sedgwick explains as a theory of negative affects, the reparative position can be read alongside Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic. It stirs a creative force for change. The reparative stance requires some amount of humility and fearlessness in the face of the cloud of unknowing, for feeling into the fog is one way of following into a loophole. Next slide. By reparatively reading the lace made by marginalized women working in Chinese treaty ports at the turn of the century, unexpected associations arise that a strictly paranoid reading would have quickly foreclosed. This way of reading brings into constellation objects that rarely get the chance to speak to one another. 12th century Benedictine manuscripts encounter 18th century Taoist robes, troubling the distinction between lace and embroidery, between common conceptions of the East and West. This unruly method of reparative reading might also be understood as a way of mending, wherein the areas of wear and tear become even more visible thanks to the addition of many stabilizing stitches. Sometimes the intention of mending is not to invisibilize moments of distress, but to add color and character, to reveal the long relationships between this particular garment and the person who lovingly wore it over and over again. With mending in mind, I work into the fraught history of lace making in order to nuance the oversimplified narrative of textile workers as victims without agency. As Sedgwick underscores, what we can best learn from such practices are perhaps the many ways selves and communities succeed in extracting sustenance from the objects of a culture, even if a culture whose avowed desire has been not to sustain them. So often, lace is simply read as a white feminine craft. It is admired for its transparency, but lace reveals as much as it conceals. What gets obscured is right there in its name. As a verb, lace means to entwine together, and this entangled relation between racialized peripheries is especially explicit when considering the colonial lace-making schools of the late 19th century. To read reparatively is to bring this web of loop stitches together across physical and temporal locales. On a Taoist Jiangyi, white and golden yellow cranes made up of thousands of small needle loop stitches soar through clusters of winged clouds. Breaks between the stitches begin to occur in an orderly fashion around their bellies, creating diamond needle lace patterns. Piercing through notated paper, silk and rami, the looped cranes and clouds on this vestment thread together seemingly desperate histories. Like a kite, these carefully rendered holes allow the cranes to take flight. When carefully placed, the openings relieve air pressure by letting the wind through, and the billowing cloth rises. These embroidered cranes fearlessly flock towards clouds of unknowing, into the realm of looped links and mushroom clouds, where mycelial networks make no distinction between earth and sky. The robe of descent ascends. What is south is north, what is east is west. Borderlines begin to blur when read in this light. And last slide. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I think this is also related to the previous question, which is inside out. So it's on the surface, but the surface is not one layer, more than one layer, because of your action, because the way you thread. So including not only the distribution, but of course, when you think about how this distribution give you feedbacks on what you should do next and what is more relevant to the readers everywhere, I think it is both these reflections and what I've been going through with the book production part, which is the authors, translators, designers, editors. So we gradually will come up with a better understanding of what we are doing and what to do next. For example, some of our titles are Chinese related, but many of them are not. But it's always about a kind of position in a society that is doing this kind of inside and out. For example, either it's the minorities in any society, either Malay communities in Singapore translated into from English to Chinese by a Chinese minority in Malaysia, for example. These kind of things always happen in our bookmaking process. That's why the book outcome, this is exactly the Malay Sketches book that's quoted by Xiao. And also, for example, this project that we just done with the Filipino activist, woodcut activist group, a feminist woodcut activist group in Manila. So they have been going inside and outside the prisoners to visit the prisoners, female political prisoners in Manila, and try to figure out their stories. And through the woodcuts made by other Asian, because knife they cannot keep in the prison, right? So try to work out these images through other Asian female woodcut artists and make it into a zine published by us. And the fundings will go back as royalties to those people, TKTK, to revisit again these political prisoners in Manila. So this kind of things I think has a lot to do with how you deal with the surface, and that there's never a surface that is still.
You're welcome to come to the stand and continue the conversation because somebody else is like using this room in a row. So like, thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.